Hello YouTube. Bane666 here. I have to say, I'm really fucking pissed off at the absolute fucking bullshit being spread by feminists at the moment, about Elliot Rodgers' involvement in the MRA. The usual suspects on Tumblr and Twitter are bad enough, I expect this type of mindless bullshit from them. But it's the so-called news sites that have really got under my skin. Not that I am surprised they would do this shit, but it has really pissed me off nonetheless. Let's take a look at these lying arseholes. First off we have Antherio, a feminist blogger from the Huffington Post with her article, "The Men's Rights Movement Taught Elliot Rodgers Everything He Needed to Know." She says in her article, link below, "Almost everything I've read about him has referred to him as a madman or mentally ill. No. We have no evidence yet that he suffered from any kind of mental illness or was under any sort of treatment." Immediately claiming that with no proof to back that fact up leads to the further stigmatization of the mentally ill, and contributes to the incorrect assumption that mental illness equals violence, and vice versa. Well, here is her first mistake, as Elliot not only suffered from a mental illness but had previously been treated for it. His parents were also concerned about his behavior and had previously called the police. We don't know whether Elliot Rodgers was mentally ill. What we do know is that he was a men's rights activist, or MRA. Actually, he was never an MRA, and had nothing to do with the movement. That's lie number 2. But let's continue. He was an active member of the PUA Hate, an online forum which has been down since the shootings, dedicated to revealing the scams, deception and misleading marketing techniques used by dating gurus and the seduction community to mislead men and profit from them. And just to clarify, they're not revealing these scams because of how vile and misogynistic they are, but rather because these men have tried these techniques and still failed to trick women into sleeping with them. As far as I know, it is true that he was part of PUA Hate. But the pickup artists are not men's rights activists. The pickup artist community do not fight to ban circumcision, or for domestic violence shelters for men, or for recognition of male issues or any of the other things that we in the men's rights movement discuss and fight for. The pickup artists are only interested in picking up women. The two groups are separate, with separate goals and methods. The fact that both groups are comprised of mainly males does not mean they are the fucking same. And correct me if I am wrong, please, as I am by no means an expert on the pickup artists and their group, but isn't PUA Hate an anti-PUA site? Either way, Elliot Rodgers was not an MRA. But let's continue. Rodgers also subscribed to several YouTube channels on how to be a pickup artist, including the Player Supreme Show and RSD Freeter, as well as multiple MRA channels. You fucking lying cunt, you dishonest piece of shit. I have looked at his YouTube channel, and he was not subscribed to not fucking one MRA channel. But I guess the low level of journalistic integrity at Huffington Post allows someone to just make this shit up. I want you to take note of something here. You'll notice she names some of the pickup artist channels that Elliot Rodgers was subscribed to, but does not mention a single MRA channel, not one. She just states he was subscribed to multiple MRA channels. As we will see soon, this is something repeated by other news sites reporting this story, which leads me to one of two possible conclusions. 1. Either they are all lying pieces of shit who have knowingly deceived their readers, so as to push their ideological agenda, or 2. One site did this and the others just regurgitated the lie without bothering to check the facts. Either dishonest arseholes, or incompetent arseholes, I will let you decide which, but let's continue. She then quotes the mad ramblings of Elliot Rodgers, and concludes, "This is what the men's rights movement teaches its members. Especially vulnerable, lonely young men who have a hard time relating to women. It teaches them that women, and especially feminist women, are to blame for their unhappiness. It teaches them that women lie, that they cheat, trick and manipulate. It teaches them that men as a social class are dominant over women and that they are entitled to women's bodies. It teaches them that women who won't give them what they want deserve some kind of punishment. And once again, more fucking lies. Where are these MRAs teaching young men that they are dominant over women? I don't see them. We do, however, talk about the negativity that has been associated to masculinity and men by feminists. This article is a good example, and it gets even worse in a later article, but we will get to that later. Where are these MRAs teaching young men that women deserve to be punished for not giving them sex? I don't see them. As for women lying, cheating, tricking, and manipulating, well, guess what? Some fucking do. Why is it okay for women to talk about the bad behavior of males, but males are forbidden to talk about the bad behavior of females? Talk about double fucking standards. But let's continue. We need to talk about this. The media, especially, needs to address this. We live in a culture that constantly devalues women in a million little different ways, and that culture has evolved to include a vast online community of men who take that devaluation to its natural conclusion: brutal, violent hatred of women. And I don't mean that all these men have been physically violent towards women, but rather that they use violent, degrading, dehumanizing language when discussing women, whose bodies, just as a reminder, they feel completely entitled to. Wow, this one must buy her poison Kool-Aid by the truckload. We don't know if Elliot Rodger was mentally ill. We don't know if he was a madman. We do know that he was desperately lonely and unhappy, and that the men's rights movement convinced him that his loneliness and unhappiness was intentionally caused by women. Because this is what the men's rights movement does: it spreads misogyny, it spreads violence, and most of all it spreads a sense of entitlement towards women's bodies. Pretending that this is a rare act perpetrated by a crazy person is disingenuous and also does nothing to address the threat of violence that women face every day. We can't just write this one off. We need to talk about all of the fucked up parts of our culture, especially the movements that teach men that they have the right to dominate and intimidate and violate women, that lead to this, and we need to change things. Because if we don't, I guarantee that this will happen again. And again. And again. Wow, what a fucking lying sack of shit, an absolute fucking scumbag. Notice she gives no evidence or examples of the things she claims. That's because there is none, and this lying sack of shit is using the deaths of 6 people to spread lies and further her agenda. This is what a feminist looks like, but I am far from finished. Next, let's take a look at news.com.au. Elliot Rodger's links to the men's rights activist movement. Okay, not off to a great start with the heading, but who knows, maybe they will have some evidence to back it up, right? Somehow I doubt it. But let's look anyway. Elliot Rodger, who killed 6 people on Friday and ranted on YouTube about the injustice of women not being attracted to him, had further links to misogynistic groups. A survey of his subscribed channels reveals the 22-year-old was a men's rights activist, or MRA. This branch of the men's liberation movement focuses on what it considers to be issues of male discrimination and oppression. So here is the first lie. Once again, they do not name any of the MRA channels, because he did not belong to any. I have looked, and found none. Rodger subscribed to several YouTube channels including RST Free Tour and The Player Supreme Show, which rails against the feminization of men and gives tips on how to pick up women. This includes a video titled Player Supreme's New PUA Technique Guaranteed Action from Women, which shows a naked man approaching women in a busy street. Once again, none of these are MRA channels, they are pickup artist channels. They are not concerned about the rights of men. If he was actually subscribed to MRA channels, then fucking name them. The MRA movement has been criticized for teaching men that women are to blame for their unhappiness, that they lie, cheat, trick and manipulate. Also that men are dominant over women and that they are entitled to women's bodies. So here we have a regurgitation of the Huffington Post piece. Clearly the writer has done zero research, and has just trusted that the Huffington Post has got it right. Well, they fucking didn't, and neither did these guys. But let's continue, as things just get worse from here. Our next article is written by Elizabeth Plank. It's called, What Elliot Rodger Said About Women Reveals Why We Need to Stamp Out Misogyny, and was posted on Policy Mike. But before we tear apart the article, let's have a look at the video that came with it.
Rather than seeing Elliot Rodger as a product of society, the media has depicted him as a bloodthirsty madman, a mere glitch in the system. And yet, the facts show a very different story. 3 of the 6 victims have been identified so far, and we know 2 of them are women. Veronica Weiss and her sorority sister, Catherine Cooper, targeted and gunned down outside their sorority house because of their gender.
I think it's only fair to point out that there were 4 males killed, and 2 females. Yes, it is true that he targeted these women because of their gender. It is also equally true that he targeted the males for theirs. But let's continue.
My panel is back with me, and I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth. Let's talk about your piece and talk about what you meant when you wrote that.
Well, I think that we like to believe in the myth that school shootings just occur, they're an anomaly, and these people are just glitches in the system, right? We write them off as crazy people, as madmen. And really, when you actually look at the data, when you look at the research, there's a lot out there that shows that they're very similar. They have a lot in common. School shootings follow patterns. Most shooters are male.
I think we actually have, you made 6 points in your article. I think we have it here, actually.
Great.
I just lost my pen. Okay. Can we get that full screen up, guys? The key points? Maybe, maybe not. Most commit school shooting. Men commit school shootings. Most school shooters are white. Most victims of school shootings are female. Many school shooters target females who have rejected them in the past. Most gunmen exhibit a large sense of entitlement. Many school shootings could qualify as hate crimes against women and girls.
Right, and what we saw online was a lot of people contesting that, and I think that's...
Just a quick note, I will dissect these points fully when we look at the article in a minute. But for now, let's continue.
Why the hashtag was so important for people to have a space, for especially women to have a space to tell their stories. And there's something about when it's a white male. You know, we don't qualify with anything. If it was a black man committing violence, we would say he's a thug. We would say that there's, we would talk about gang violence.
In that door of his apartment,
knocking
like
it down, exactly.
Right.
If it was a Muslim man, we would be talking about a religious extremist. And there's something about white maleness that just isn't visible. It's this sort of irreproachable standard that we don't hold accountable.
Oh, I see. White males are never held accountable. This would be funny if it wasn't such a serious topic. She complains that women get harassed online. Ignores the hate towards white straight males on places like Tumblr. And then echoes that hate by claiming that white males are never held accountable. I would really prefer not to make this whole thing about race. As I will show later, it's not relevant and is just a distraction. But let's get the facts straight. Elliot Rodger was half Caucasian and half Asian. I only point this out because I suspect, if he was a victim instead of a shooter, he might be referred to as mixed race, or possible Asian if the media wanted to put a race attack spin on the story. But I will debunk this race argument fully when I get to the article. Let's continue.
And there was even this pickup artist company that sort of fit into this whole men's rights activist movement. And they actually commented, oh, if only you had come to us. If only more men came to us to know how to pick up women, this wouldn't have to happen.
Okay, let me point out here that Elizabeth Plank is a journalist who is appearing on national television. She is meant to be someone who has some knowledge about the topic she is discussing. Keeping that in mind, let's hear that clip again.
And there was even this pickup artist company that sort of fit into this whole men's rights activist movement. And they actually commented, oh, if only you had come to us. If only more men came to us to know how to pick up women, this wouldn't have to happen.
Oh, I see. So the pickup artists are a company, and that company is connected to the men's rights movement. Wow, she obviously spent a long time researching this topic. Obviously she is completely fucking wrong on both counts, and either through ignorance and laziness, or willful deception, she is spreading false information. Judging by the tone in her voice, it's more laziness than willful deception. She probably spent all of 5 minutes reading Man Boob's website before coming on the show, although it's doubtful she even did that. This is someone who is meant to be a journalist. She is paid to do this job. Well, I think it's pretty clear by now that it's not about facts or evidence, but about spreading her ideology. But let's continue.
As if that kind of violence is valid. As if that kind of violence against women is justified.
Well, and you know, Erica, to that point, Michael Kimmel in Huffington Post wrote the following. He's a social studies, gender studies professor. Righteous retaliation is a deeply held, almost sacred tenet of masculinity. If you're aggrieved, you are entitled to retribution. American men don't just get mad, we get even.
That's right, and this is a distinctly American problem. We may have come a long way, but we have a long way to go. American women are 11 times more likely to to be killed with a gun than any other women in any other developed country.
Okay, I do not want to get into a debate about gun laws, that's a discussion for another time. But I do have to address the figure just used. Because she only gives a figure on female victims, and fails to give the male comparison, she gives the impression that it only affects females, or that it affects them more. So let's compare. Okay, so in every single state in America, without fail, the number of male deaths due to firearms is vastly higher than the equivalent female number. Which leads to the question, if this is an issue that affects men more than women, then why are women being portrayed as targets, or the majority of victims? Either she should be arguing in favor of gun control based on the greater number of deaths in general, or she should be arguing in favor of gun control because of the greater number of male victims. But to argue in favor of gun control because of its effects on women, without even acknowledging the greater number of male deaths, would suggest that those male deaths are either less important, or unimportant at all. Once again, let me point out that I am not taking a side in the gun debate here, just pointing out that she views female victims as being vastly more important than male victims. Anyway, let's have a look at Elizabeth Plank's article. After a couple of paragraphs filled with quotes from Elliot Rodger, link below so you can read the entire article, Elizabeth Plank makes her first of 6 points. 1. Men commit most school shootings. All but one of the mass murders in the U.S. over the last 30 years has been committed by men. The fact that gender is often omitted from the story speaks to how we still see the masculine as the irreproachable and invisible standard. As Michael Kimmel notes in his extensive research on school shootings, if the genders were reversed and most school shootings were committed by women, you'd bet gender would be part of the analysis. We often instead shift the conversation to mental illness and describe shooters as madmen, while the characteristics they exhibit are often an extension of toxic masculinity ideals that are institutionally reinforced. Okay, I agree partly with this. It is true that the majority of school shootings, at least to my knowledge, are committed by males. But the rest of the conclusions are absolute bullshit. If toxic masculinity was such a huge problem, and this was institutionally reinforced, then wouldn't there be school shooting every week? Let's try an experiment. Let's pick a form of homicide that females commit more than males. Using statistics for 2009, from the United States, there were 185 children killed just by their fathers, which is 14.8% of the total deaths, but 341 children killed just by their mothers, which is 27.3% of the total. Almost twice as many mothers killed their own children as fathers did. This is not an abnormality for 2009, this is a consistent figure. Every year twice as many mothers kill their children as do fathers. But do we scream and jump up and down that this is the result of toxic femininity? Do we claim there is a war on children by their mothers? Do we claim this is part of female nature? Do we state that children are not safe with their mothers, and should never be left alone with a female? Of course not, because the vast majority of mothers do not commit these crimes, because the vast majority of mothers would be horrified by the abuse and murder of their children. And it would be unfair to claim that the actions of a minority of females should be considered the norm for all of that gender. Yet that's exactly what Elizabeth Plank does in this article. The number of gunmen shooting up schools is incredibly low considering the population size of the United States. Yet she feels perfectly fine in implying that this is part of masculinity, as if it is normal, average and common amongst males. She also implies, by quoting Michael Kimmel, that a crime committed by more females than males would get greater attention. Well, I have already given an example of a crime committed more often by females than males, yet I do not see a great deal of coverage in the media, or discussion. I understand why a shooting might get more press coverage, but in 2009 there were 341 children murdered by their mothers in the United States. Was there that many killed by male gunmen in schools? Somehow I cannot imagine there was. So it would be easy to argue that mothers killing their children is a far greater problem than male gunmen killing people in schools. That is, if we really wanted to play the gender blame game. There are bad people who do bad things in both genders. Testosterone or the Y chromosome does not automatically make someone evil, and being female does not automatically make someone good. There is one big difference when it comes to gender though, and Elizabeth Plank's article is perfect proof of this. When a woman commits an horrendous crime like killing her child, society asks what is wrong with her. What made her do it? We say things like, she must be ill and in need of help. We excuse her actions on outside forces or mental illness, and often there are good reasons for this, but not always. Society, or at very least, people like Elizabeth Plank, aren't so accommodating to male perpetrators though. You'll note that she dismissed mental illness as a cause, despite that fact that Elliot Rodger had a history of mental illness, and instead blamed masculinity. In other words, if a female commits a crime, it's due to mental illness, or because of others, but if a man commits a crime, it's simply because he is a man. This attitude has nothing to do with toxic masculinity, and everything to do with the warped views of toxic feminism. Next, and here, yet again we have more misinformation about the MRA. Details are still emerging, but according to the Daily Kos, Elliot Rodger subscribed to many men's rights activists' MRA websites and may have adopted their radical ideology about women. The comments that motivated his killing spree were not far from many of the ones that are openly made by men in those communities. Even in the aftermath of the tragedy in Santa Barbara, a pickup artist group many of which often classify as MRAs left a horrendous comment publicizing their services, as if their view of entitlement to women were valid in the first place. You'll notice here that once again the claim is made that he was part of men's rights groups. She doesn't even quote the Daily Kos correctly, which states that Elliot Rodger was subscribed to many MRA channels on YouTube. I would argue that there is a difference between a website and a YouTube channel. I know it might be considered nitpicking, but I think it goes to show her sloppiness as a journalist and her inability to represent or understand even simple facts. But either way, no evidence whatsoever has been present to suggest that Elliot Rodger was connected to either MRA websites or YouTube channels. As I have previously stated, I have checked his YouTube channel subscriptions and found none whatsoever. Also, once again she tries to tie the MRM with the pickup artists. This is all lies and propaganda with no supporting evidence to support it. I am not including the Daily Kos article in this video, as the Justicar has already ripped it apart, too. Most school shooters are white. Oh no, she is playing the race card, so typical. Let's get stuck into it. School shooters aren't just mostly male, they are also overwhelmingly white. Over the course of the last 3 decades, 90% of school shootings in high school or elementary school settings were committed by someone white. As Michael Kimmel notes, white men who commit mass shootings want to take their own life as well as the lives of others around them. Kimmel describes this as a video game-esque ploy where the shooter thinks, if I'm going to die, then so is everybody else, they seem to say. To talk about these crimes as simply rooted in mental illness is short-sighted. Yes, of course, this is mental illness speaking, but it is mental illness speaking with a voice that has a race and a gender, explains Kimmel. Okay, so it looks like a large part of this article is cut and paste quotes from Kimmel, and misquotes from the Daily Kos. Who would have guessed that journalism could be so easy? Now in true hack journalist style, she has given us 2 completely different figures here. In text form, she quotes Kimmel saying 90% of school shooters are white, but in the graph she provides it says 79%. Which figure are we meant to take serious, I wonder? I tell you what, let's split the difference and say that the percentage of white gunmen is 85%. You have to admit that is pretty fucking high, right? Wow, it seems pretty convincing when you look at such a high number. But only if we look at the number out of context. Let me explain. Here is the population of the United States presented by race and percentage. we can clearly see that 77.9% of the US population is white, which is not very far off 85%, is it? In other words, if over 3/4 of the United States is made up of whites, then it stands to reason that a similar percentage of whites would be presented in the number of school shooters. For example, if we look at the population of Asians in America presented by percentage, we get 5.1%. Now let's compare this to the number of Asians who have done school shootings. Using Elizabeth Plank's own figures, the number is 9%. Once again fairly close. I guess I could just leave it at that, but I still have another couple of cards to play. Elizabeth Plank is going on the false assumption that Elliot Rodger is white, when in fact he is half white and half Asian. So what box do we put him in? The 85% of white school shooters, or the 9% of Asian school shooters? If we are really going to play the race card, and claim that it is a relevant factor, then it should really matter which group we place him in, shouldn't it? Of course Elizabeth Plank just assumed that he's white because it suits her agenda, but the reality isn't so black and white, excuse the pun. There is one other point to make, which is relevant to both of her points so far. The sample size that she is using, to make the case that society breeds toxic white males that want to kill women, the sample size is 22. That's right, she is using 22 cases over 30 years. I guess it's easier for some people to just blame white males, as opposed to believing there might be 22 people with serious mental illness. I will let you decide which makes more sense. Next. 3. Most victims of school shootings are female. Oh, this will be good, let's see what she has to say. Although it's rarely addressed by the media, most victims of school shootings are female. Indeed, according to a blogger at RadFemRadar who compiled the sex of school shootings, female students are twice as likely to be injured than male students, but news outlets often rarely even bother to give the sex of those who were injured. Although we often talk about the fact that men perpetuate most violent acts, we rarely acknowledge the other side of that equation: women are most often victimized by men. Okay, so once again Elizabeth Plank has provided us with some figures, so let's use them. She is in fact correct that more female students have been killed, with the numbers being 34 males and 47 females. Although females are higher, the numbers are still fairly close. Oh, but hold on, what are those other two sets of figures there? It seems dishonest Elizabeth has only given us a third of the statistics. Coincidence it's the third that supports her argument, unlike the other 2/3. So let's look at totals. 24 male staff, plus 34 male students, plus 13 others, equals 71 males killed in total. Let's compare that to the females. 10 female staff, plus 47 female students, plus 8 others, equals 65 females killed in total. Last I checked, 71 was higher than 65. So if more males have been killed in school shootings than females, then how does she come to the conclusion that, quote, women are most often victimized by men? Next. 4. Many school shooters target females who have rejected them in the past. A study that looked at 15 school shootings between 1995 and 2001 found that romantic rejection was a common feature in most gun-related incidents. It is not uncommon for perpetrators to target ex-girlfriends or classmates who have refused advances. Elliot Rodger cited this frustration openly and specifically went after sluts who weren't interested in him. What study? Considering dishonest Elizabeth's track record so far, I'm not willing to just take her word for it. Although I admit this is quite possibly true. Okay, so let me play devil's advocate here, and assume that for once in this article, dishonest Elizabeth has presented us with something that resembles the truth. The population in America, in 2001, was 285,082,000, and Elizabeth has presented a study focusing on 15 individuals. 15 out of 285,082,000 equals around 0.00000526% of the total population. Wow, that's almost an epidemic. Lucky we have feminism to save us. Next. 5. Most gunmen exhibit a large sense of entitlement. Like many other school shooters, Elliot Rodger displayed a colossal sense of entitlement in his unsettling manifesto. He describes his inability to attract women as something he needed to punish them for. He describes the fact that women are not interested in him as an injustice and a crime because he is the perfect guy. In an attempt to prove that he is the alpha male, he decides to slaughter them. He believes he is entitled to women's bodies and, when denied access, he retaliates. It's not fair. You girls have never been attracted to me. I don't know why you girls have never been attracted to me, but I will punish you all for it, he says. Okay, let me start off by saying that in no way, shape or form do I support anything done by Elliot Rodgers, or others like him. But I cannot say that I am entirely surprised that this type of thing happens either. The feminists have reduced him to a guy who couldn't get laid, and felt entitled to women's bodies. Personally, I think it's much more complex than that. I think Elliot Rodger, much like other school shooters, Columbine for example, felt rejected by society at large, felt alone, and unloved, with nothing to live for. This is pretty clear from parts of his manifesto. Considering the high male suicide rate, I don't think it's a stretch to say these feelings can be common amongst men. It's just that many males take their own lives, as opposed to the relative few that take other lives first. We should be using this time to talk about mental health issues, not feminism. Once again, let me be clear, I am not excusing his actions, just seeking rational reasons why he did what he did. This kind of attitude toward females can be seen in bullying patterns too. Although we tend to believe that girls bully girls and boys bully boys, cross-gender bullying is much more frequent than we think. When it occurs, it is often unpopular boys who are not deemed to be the alpha male by their peers who bully popular girls. These boys seem to use bullying to prove their manhood. Okay, I do not claim to be an expert on bullying, but my understanding is it is often the unpopular boys who are picked on by the popular girls. From memory, this was the case in Columbine. If anyone has any further information on this, please leave it in the comments section below with appropriate links. We live in a society where being white and male affords one with countless privileges and, for some, a toxic sense of entitlement. As Michael Kimmel explains, righteous retaliation is a deeply held, almost sacred, tenet of masculinity. If you are aggrieved, you are entitled to retribution. American men don't just get mad, we get even. Oh, I see yet more quotes from Kimmel. More bullshit about masculinity. Let's just skip to the final part. Next. 6. Many school shootings could qualify as hate crimes against women and girls. Note the use of the word, many. How many is many? Is it a lot of many? What's the average number of many? I think the fact that she does not give us a number, or say most, makes me suspect that when she says many, she actually means a couple. But let's look at what she says. This is what Mark Elaine said before killing 14 women at a school in Montreal in 1989. Since then, similarly chilling school shootings have specifically targeted women and girls. In 2012, for example, when a 42-year-old man entered Oikos University, he only targeted women and killed 6 females. The only male casualty was the person driving the car he carjacked. Although these were classified as school shootings, they should also be considered hate crimes against women. She quite possibly has a point that these 2 cases could be considered hate crimes against females. But note that she only gave us 2 cases. Is this the many she was talking about? Is 2 really many? I have to ask the question, is this it? Because up until now, please correct me if I am wrong, but up until now she has been talking about school killings in America, yet here she gives us a story from Montreal. Now we are all somewhat guilty of using stats and figures from across the Western world. I always try to use local stats to the story, if possible, as I have done in this video. Although sometimes it can be good to use multiple stories from across the West to show that it's not a localized problem. So it's possible she is using the Mark Elaine incident that occurred in Montreal, because it is a good example of a male gunman targeting females specifically. Or, going by the sloppiness, lies, and exaggerations in her articles so far, it's also very possible that these are the only two she could find. It really isn't possible to know when she uses the word many, with no corresponding number to quantify it. So as you can see guys, the feminist propaganda machine is in full swing. They really do not care about facts, or evidence, or honesty. They are just interested in using the 6 victims of Elliot Rodger to tarnish the men's rights movement. So here is what I want each and every one of you to do. Whenever you see someone claim that Elliot Rodger was an MRA, correct them, and ask them for evidence. Do not be rude, or abusive. I know that can be hard sometimes with some of these people and their lies and bullshit, but keep your cool, point out their faulty arguments, and ask for evidence of their claims. Most likely you will just get abuse, or ignored by these people. You know the type I am talking about, but others are watching, others are reading your comments, others who might be more open-minded, or who have only heard the false claims. Do this in the comments section of articles like the ones I have just shown, on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, YouTube, and anywhere else this bullshit was spread. Elliot Rodger was not a part of the men's rights movement, and it's up to each and every one of us to correct anyone who claims otherwise. I'm doing my part, but I need your help as well. We all need your help. We all need you to do your part. So go do it. And whatever you do, don't drink the poison Kool-Aid.